Okay. Once again, welcome. How many of you have seen a Star Wars movie? Wonderful. I should ask, how many of you have not ever seen a Star Wars movie? Anybody? Oh, we do have a couple people. Okay. Well, don't worry, there's no test on this. It's just a general understanding. I'm going to throw out some terms that, other people might know a little bit more, but that's okay. You could still be here. So, the title of my talk, May the Force Be With You. It should be subtitled, Awakening the Inner Jedi. Because what I decided was I wanted to pull all the wisdom from all the Star Wars movies that I had seen through quotes and kind of compile it based on things that kind of fit in with our teaching. Because there's a lot of wisdom in those words. But my first question was, well, what is this force, and do I really want it to be with me? And so I looked back, and I found that it sounded very similar to the Taoist idea of the Qi, that subtle stream of energy that animates through all life force. And then in researching a little bit more, I stumbled across a letter that Einstein had written his daughter and proposed or just stated that his letter should not be released to the public until 20 years after his death because he felt that our consciousness wasn't quite ready for them. And in it, he talks about the force as well. There is an extremely powerful force that so far science has not found a formal explanation to. It is a force that includes and governs all others and is even behind the phenomenon operating the universe and has yet to be identified by us. The universal force is love. This force explains everything and gives meaning to life. This is the variable that we have ignored for too long, maybe because we are afraid of love, because it is the only energy in the universe that man has not learned to drive at will. So, once again, Einstein was way before his time. I also found some similarities with our book of the month, The Untethered Soul. Michael Singer talks about on page 44 that we have this unlimited energy. It's our birthright. It's the most important thing, this inner energy. And then, of course, our founder, Ernest Holmes, talks about there's a power for good in the universe that we can use. So I like to think that the force is all these things and then some that we haven't even discovered yet. And the best part is, no one can own it, for it operates through us and as us. We're all a Jedi when you think about it. We can all use it. Now, as I thought about the movies, I thought about the creator of Star Wars, and I thought, who is this George Lucas guy? Why is he weaving these spiritual themes throughout mainstream movies? And when I looked into his reasoning a bit more, I found that he wanted to expose the world to Eastern philosophy. He felt that America was being limited by just having Christianity offered to it, and that we needed to introduce young people to these Buddhist ideas, to these ancient teachings that were hidden, and he felt that a very good way of doing that would be through these incredibly exciting movies. But I was surprised in my research to find that Star Wars almost was never even created. So, once again, I'm going to be giving my thumbs up. That doesn't mean people are coming in late either. I'm just letting David know to change the slide. So enjoy this little clip. I want to thank David, who spent a long time getting that clip just right. Anyway, that's quite a formidable task that George Lucas had to take on. What vision are you believing in? Are you letting others around you talk you out of your dream? Do you let the obstacles get in your way and be the reason why you're not manifesting what you want? Now, once again, George Lucas had this incredible creativity that he could have others express his views for him. And so this Jedi master in the movie states, "Your focus determines your reality." Sound familiar to our teaching? Now, the trick is, it's not just about positive thinking. I've had friends who've come up to me and said, "But Lisa, I'm thinking positively." And then I'll say, but you're believing negatively. And so it's all that conversation that goes in, but behind those little positive thoughts. And positive thoughts are a good start. But if the rest of the 23 hours of the day, you're just kind of cursing where you're at and complaining, we often get stuck in fear. And so despite what those thoughts are, if our beliefs are based in fear, then that leads to challenges. I love Yoda. I could just sit at his feet all day. I know he's not real. But it's like, forget all the action scenes. I just want to hear this guy talk. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Now, we don't believe in an opposing force in this teaching, a good and evil, a heaven and hell, or a devil. But fear is probably the closest thing to that opposing force. And basically, all fear means is false evidence appearing real. Think about that. False evidence. Fear is also the gateway emotion. It leads to the hard stuff. It's almost like we get into these downward spirals when we get caught up in those stories that we're telling ourselves. In fact, if we really started to question our fearful thinking, we'd find that basically it's more, once again, this animated story we're making up in our heads. Or we're remembering some past fearful event. Studies have shown that that's 90% of our fearful thoughts. The fear of loss is a path to the dark side. Attachment leads to jealousy, the shadow of greed, that is. Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. Now, there's a lot there, but I like to focus on the last part as a spiritual practice, where he says, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. That's a difficult thing to do. It's a Buddhist practice, practicing that non-attachment. Now, many people have been forced into circumstances beyond their control where they had to let go. Now, a long, long time ago, on an island far, far away, I had a similar experience that caused me to truly work on this practice. And it was back in 1986, and that's important because there were no cell phones or internet back then. And I was out in the Peace Corps on this little island. And every 2 weeks, I had to walk across 5 little abandoned islands to get to the runway strip where the plane would land. And I'd get my mail and supplies. Now, they were abandoned islands, and it was about 5 miles, but I had to time it just perfectly because the low tide was the only time I could cross the islands. And the high tide, when it would come in, the flow between the islands would get stronger, and the sharks would get bigger. So I had to really be precise in getting there and getting back to my island. Well, this one particular day, I showed up at the airstrip just on time, but the plane was a few hours late. And so I sat and waited, finally retrieving my mail and belongings. I couldn't read the letters then. I just raced back as quickly as I could. And I was doing pretty well until I got to the last gap that I had to cross. By then, the tide had come in. The water was flowing forcefully. It was getting dark, and I tried to wade out into it, but I got knocked over by a wave, and I almost lost my things. It ripped the shoe off my foot, and I managed to crawl back up onto the island like a drowned rat at that point. And I realized I was going to be stranded on this island for a good 6 hours by myself. So I figured I might as well just read my mail from home. And I read the first letter, and it was a letter from my mother, who shared that my brother-in-law had been in a serious motorcycle accident, and they didn't think he was going to make it. They thought he had brain damage. And she also shared that my sister was diagnosed with some fatal disease. And I was like, really, Mom? It was one of those things that I felt helpless, out of control, unable to communicate with anybody, but sit in my own thoughts. And it really helped strengthen that muscle. For to give up control is the only way to have control. When I couldn't control the outer conditions, I had to find peace with what was. It really helped that my Science of Mind magazine had come in that shipment, and I got to read it cover to cover and get all this wisdom. So, of course, within the next few weeks, I gained information that everybody was recovering and healing just fine. And I told my mother to not write me in the midst of a crisis again, to wait until things were resolved. But it did help me get that experience of letting go and practicing non-attachment and trusting the outcome. Now, this next interchange, some of you might recognize from the movie where Luke and Yoda are having a little interaction, and Luke says, I can't believe it, when Yoda does something. And then Yoda replies, that is why you fail. Now, it's okay to not always be certain, but in this universe that we operate in, vibrational-based, belief-based, that's where the power is. So we've built barriers against our success by our lack of belief in what we're trying to do. If you think you can or think you can't, either way, you're right. I think Henry Ford said that. I also think of watching my son learn to ride a bike. And he used to ride his bike when he was very first beginning at it. He'd ride his bike on the sidewalk right near grass that he knew he could crash land in. So he'd wait, just go a few feet, and then dive toward the grass because he didn't believe he could do it. It wasn't until he decided to ride across the cul-de-sac without any soft barriers that he was able to be successful. It was a whole mental shift. Try not. Do or do not. There is no try. Now, Lauren, could you help me, please? My childhood friend, really, I just need, no, please, come up just real quickly. I'm sorry to pick. I've known her since 3rd grade. Okay, it's payback time. So, will you try and pick up the pen? No. Okay. I know I paid you $130,000 to keep that quiet, remember? Try and pick up the pen.
Oh, God, why?
Okay,
no, I did it.
I know, I said try. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Okay.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Can I
now
be
pick up the pen. Now pick up the pen. Okay, thank you. You can come later.
I hate you so much.
Okay, let's give her a hand. Okay. Sorry about that. James was supposed to be here. I was going to call on James. No. Now, the whole point, though, is when you try to do something, you leave yourself the option of failure because you just say, I don't know about you who heard your teenagers, for instance, say, oh, I'll try and do the dishes, or I'll try and do my homework. And it's not until you have that shift that in situations in your life you can truly be successful when you just say, I'm going to do it. Not just try, because try does leave you a little bit of the out. Judge me by my size, do you? Size matters not when it comes to the force and to life. The universe is very powerful. It rotates planets throughout the universe, the galaxies. And it can take a little acorn and create a giant oak tree. It's amazing the force, the power behind so many things. And yet, we sometimes think it's going to be stressed out about creating a new job for us. Manifesting a parking place, a lover, or $1 million makes no difference to the universe. It's all that same energy, and yet sometimes we block it by our belief that it's too difficult or too big. Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them. Life is filled with conditional illusions. I took a walk in the park the other day, and I looked up at the oaks and the sycamore trees, and they all appeared to be dead. If I didn't have that previous belief that there is this life streaming through them that I'm not yet able to see, that I'd be sad about all the dead trees in the park. And there's so many other things that if we trusted just our eyesight to believe, would be deceived. Think of the stars that have burnt out millions of years ago, but we're still seeing the light. Think of the stars that we can't even see because the light hasn't gotten to us yet. So we have to trust beyond the illusions of just the outward world. Let the past die. Kill it if you have to. I know, it sounds a little brutal, but the source or the force is always pulling us forward. Sometimes we try and justify where we are today because of our past experiences. We go on and on about, oh, if you knew what my childhood was like, if you knew what I had to put up with, then you'd see why I am the way I am today. So don't explain your life away, citing the events of the past. It's kind of like if you got in your car and you looked in the rearview mirror and then you tried to drive down the road. You'd crash within moments. You can't look at the reference point behind you in order to go forward in life. Yes. You must unlearn what you have learned. Sometimes we get into the comfort zones of our thinking. Our parents kind of taught us to believe certain things, and we don't like to question those. One example that I can think of right off is religions. Religions that taught us to be fear-based, to think that God is something that we should be afraid of, that He's going to punish us, and that it's a He, first of all. So we grew up with this idea of God and what we had to earn to get anything. That oftentimes we felt that maybe we're not worthy enough. And we were born of original sin, so we have to spend our whole lifetime kind of living up to this unreal expectation. So that's something else that we have to unlearn. Racism. We also look at people who are different from us and either out of fear, judge them and see them somehow as not worthy or on the same level that we are. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I grew up thinking that women or girls weren't as good as boys or men because I never saw them in positions of leadership. They never announced the nightly news, so I thought, well, if it's important, then a man would be saying it. I had to unlearn those views that said that somehow half the population wasn't as good just because they were female. Truly wonderful the mind of a child is. I love what the mind of a child could grow. Now, you've all had children in your life to observe, whether they be grandkids, nieces, nephews, your own children. I, too, had my son to observe quite a bit. And I'll never forget one very hot summer day in Roseville. It must have been way over 100, like Chico summers. And we decided to do a lemonade stand. Now, I knew we were going to make a ton of money because we had gone out and got all this fresh lemon and squeezed it, added some concentrate. We had all these a lot of ice. We built a lemonade stand. And I'm getting ready to make the sign to put the price on. I said, Chris, how much should we charge for each cup of lemonade? And his little sad blue eyes looked up at me shocked and said, Nothing, Mom, because we'll get back love. Well, I felt so bad all of a sudden, trying to profit off people's thirst. We ended up giving away about 50 glasses of lemonade that day. We did get back love. Right around that same time period. It's that innocent perspective that children have. And so he also asked me, Mom, are men allowed to be ministers? To which I quickly responded and said, of course, son, but they have to be gay. And no, I didn't really say that part. But so children grow up with different beliefs, this innocence that life is a certain way. Hope is like the sun. If you only believe in it when you see it, you'll never make it through the night. I really like this quote because it got me through the past few weeks. How many of you had that wonderful, nasty flu, cold thing over the last few weeks? I know quite a few people, too, are still sick with it and not here. But that was one thing where I just felt, I'm not going to make it through the night. My body ached all over. I had this conditional awareness that life was not good anymore, and I just didn't want to experience it. But I had to remember back that my body was not who I was. That hope, and remembering, just like the sun always shines, it's always up there somewhere. And so, too, is our natural state of health and well-being. So I watched lots of funny YouTube videos of dogs and puppies and kids and more of those to try and get that laughter generated again, that emotion that reminded me of my pure state of being, which is joy. So once again, don't be conditional in your thinking that what you see is the way it is when there's so much more light just above the clouds. I really like this last part. That's not how we're going to win. Not fighting what we hate, saving what we love. To me, this is so powerful because we are, going back to the first quote, what you focus on, what you give your energy to, is what you create more in your life. So we have a war against cancer, a war against drugs, a war against so many things. But until we start being for something, that's where the energy lies. I love seeing the students from Florida stand up for safe schools. I love seeing people go out and work for a clean environment. I love seeing people go out and be for peace instead of just against war. So the universe doesn't care exactly what you believe in. It's kind of like gravity. It doesn't matter if you believe in gravity or not, it'll bring you down when you break that law. And so too with your focus. What you give your attention to, you get more of. Now it's important to have a mantra or kind of a chant that you can ground yourself in. Anchor yourself to the core of your being when your mind just wants to go off in fleeting directions. If you don't have one, that's okay. Maybe you can borrow this guy's. So, whatever it is in your life, take this wisdom and know that you all have that inner Jedi waiting to be expressed. And the Force truly is with you. Thank you so much. And I'd like to invite Warren back up.